Well, good evening everyone and welcome to the VLGA's Leading the Agenda event, Something's Gotta Give, achieving gender parity in sport and community infrastructure. My name's Catherine Arndt and I'm the CEO of the Victorian Local Governance Association and I welcome you all here tonight. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting tonight and their elders past and present and future. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our partners, Picture Partners, and in particular Frank Wyatt, who is here tonight, who heads up the International Institute of Entrepreneurship, which is part of Picture Partners. Value add, I think they would say, for their many diverse clients. I'd like to acknowledge all guests tonight, and in particular the VLGA's President, Councillor Mark Atley, the VLGA Board Directors who are here, our elected representatives and councillors, Sue McKill, the Executive Director of the Australian Sports Commission. It's great that Sue could be with us tonight. All club sporting reps who are here and all other guests and friends. Thank you so much for your attendance tonight at this really topical and what will be a really interesting and fun style event. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'd like to welcome our moderator for tonight, Liddy Clark. Liddy has worked in all areas of communication management for local government, corporate and not-for-profit sectors, specialising in strategic communications, crisis communications, facilitations, campaigns and media relations. She is an active mentor for women in leadership positions. She also applies her talents as an accomplished and well-known actor, writer and director to deliver workshops with impact. Liddy is a former Queensland Member of Parliament and Minister. She's a keen cricketer who plays for the Clifton Hill Women's and a competitive tango dancer. And I'm very pleased to say that Liddy currently works with us at the VLGA as our communications and media coordinator and also reviews theatre for Stage Noise in Melbourne. Welcome, Liddy, and I would like to hand over now to Liddy, who's going to lead our panel and introduce our very distinguished speakers tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. It is a great pleasure to be sitting up here with this formidable trio. I have to have apologies. Our fourth speaker or panellist tonight, Vicky, who is a Member of Parliament, is actually still in the House. They've got big legislation that they're debating tonight, and I can understand why she's still there. So we accept her apologies, absolutely. But she's also a keen supporter of women in sport in her electorate in Eltham. It is a big topic. It's 2017, and we're still talking about parity and gender equality, not only in sport but everywhere. And I have to say, I'm slightly disappointed. Now, having said that, I'm just leaving. Okay, this is where we're jumping in. But I'd like to introduce you to our panel. Of course, we have the pocket rocket, Angela Nichols. Who, interestingly enough, did her honours degree from the University of Adelaide in politics. So, you know, politics and sport, I quite like it. She's always been searching for new challenges, and she's worked with the ABC and did a lot for the 7:30 report, but she wanted to go where no woman in Melbourne has dared to go. And that was the testosterone-charged world of breakfast sports radio. Whoa. And she was the first woman to co-host the Sports 927's breakfast program, which is a position she held for 2 years alongside the 1990 Collingwood Premiership player Michael Christian.
I got sacked after 2 years.
I'm liking that. I got sacked from Facebook.
You didn't tell me that.
It's not something you make public. Oh, really? Could you turn the camera on? Now, Angela is also, she's been a brilliant sports reporter and someone that I've looked up to for a long time. She's also written books, and she has her second book with her tonight, which is for sale for $30 and will be signed. And it's her second book, and it's called Breaking the Mould, Taking a Hammer to Sexism in Sport, which I think is a really, really great topic and one that I'm very interested in learning about and hearing about. She's produced her first feature film. She's an ambassador for the Adelaide Football Club. You know, and it goes on.
And still, I haven't recovered from the grand final.
Go Tigers.
Right?
Go Tigers.
I'm just going to leave.
No, please stay. I was a Hawthorn supporter.
Right.
And sitting next to the pocket rocket, of course, is yet another Adelaide person. They went to university, the same university. It's fantastic. We have Kelly Underwood here.
I'm a bit older.
No. But of course, Kelly is very well known to us. She specialises in Australian football, netball and tennis. She's notable as being the first woman in history to call an Australian Football League match on television, which is seen by many. And that's a really big landmark, because we know how hard that would have been and how closed shop it was and has been for so long. So congratulations on that. She's the co-host of The Back Page on Fox Sports. She's had a huge winter. I think you're looking forward to the summer break, although you still be out there. So look, welcome. Thank you, Kelly, for being here. And we have Felicity Federico, who is currently the Vice President of the Australian Local Government Women's Association, of whom we have the President with us this evening, Ellen. But she's also a Director of the Victorian Amateur Football Association and a player.
Oh, soccer player.
Soccer player. Oh, God. Isn't it close?
One's around four.
Yes, okay. But the really important thing about Felicity and why she's with us and sitting here with us tonight is that she was an instigator in a grassroots campaign when she was the mayor and a councillor for Bayside City Council of getting women in sport and the council working together to make it happen. So, and that was a pretty big campaign, and it's ongoing even since she stepped down from council. So it's really great to have you here. Welcome. The format is we've got some questions that the panellists have been given throughout the week, but we're also going to take questions from the audience as well, because I know there's a number of questions about club cricket, club football, club soccer, club hockey, club anything, especially with women now moving so much into those areas. And are the clubs ready? Do they know what to do? Are they still being beholden? What's happening with the grounds? What's happening with the clubs that don't have women or they belong to another association? It's a very tricky time for women in sport. So, but first of all, to my panellists here, women's sport, as we know, has been around for decades, a bit like what I said in the beginning. Why is it that we still are unable to build, house and accommodate women's teams in our local infrastructure? Woo. Kelly.
Well, I mean, I think it starts with leadership, doesn't it? How many women are on boards and things like that. The decision makers are probably what they've been over the last decade or so going back over the last few years have been men. And I guess women typically aren't ones to really nominate themselves or put themselves forward. And men aren't, there's not too many men out there that would say, hey, why don't you jump on board or come along and whatnot. So I think that it takes, we use the term male champion of change quite a bit, but particularly in my career there's been quite a few influential men that have sort of helped me along the way. So it's a combination of women, putting their hand up, saying, hey, I'd like to be a decision maker here in this, wherever it might be, community, club, whatever it might be. And probably it takes a type of man that's in that leadership position to welcome that woman and bring them in. So I would imagine that from when it comes to leadership, making those decisions, the majority in the past have been men.
But with the statistics that you've got with women in AFL, where we started last year, and where we're going, if you could give us those stats and how are we going to accommodate that?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge for and, you know, obviously I'm sports media, I'm not from the local government, but I would imagine that one of the biggest challenges for councils out there at the moment is we've seen the explosion of the women's AFLW and women's footy then at community and ground level. And I was speaking to someone today who told me there were 550 roundabout women's teams in Victoria last year, and they expect the census is out in November, but the final figures will be an extra 530 female teams playing in Victoria alone. So
that's huge.
That is extraordinary, trying to cater for those sort of numbers, and I guess, you know, that's huge for the decision makers at that local level when it sort of comes to how do you accommodate all these girls. What are the grounds like? How do you continue to maintain them? You know, can we get some lights in and therefore we can play at different times? What about the times of the year and all these sort of things that come into account? So,
yeah. Angela?
I'm going to go back to ancient Greece. It's a good place to start. Traditions. So we talk a lot about what's happened over the past few years. I like to go back and look at sport and masculinity. Those two things have gone hand in hand since ancient times. It's been really hard for women and girls to break into that space because sport is a masculine pursuit. You know, women have been excluded from golf clubs, from the long room at the MCG, the MCC. There haven't been, you know, girls' footy teams, cricket teams, rugby league teams until quite recently. So it's just been this exclusion. And it goes back to these old attitudes that sport is a male thing. So what we have to do is undo that way of thinking, and we are starting to do it, which is great, and see sport as something for all. And that includes the boardroom, where these decisions are made to sort out participation at grassroots level.
But even going back to the ancient times, as you say, in Norway, the women's soccer players have parity of wage, and they are actually more on the world stage than the male players. How can it happen there? What's wrong with Australia?
Oh, where do I start? Get me on a plane to Norway.
But I mean,
Norway
similar here. The Matildas are ranked 6th in the world, and our Socceroos are 47 in the world, and Tim Cale's the highest earning Socceroo. His first year with Melbourne City last year rumoured to be $4 million for a season. Sam Kerr's our household name for the Matildas. And I interviewed her only a couple of weeks ago, and she's just gone full-time, which means she plays for Perth Glory for probably wouldn't even be $15,000 for the 4 months, and then she flies to the US and plays for New Jersey and plays, of course, for the Matildas. So her 3 teams make up just enough cash to get by and work out how to pay them.
But why is it so hard?
So the argument that the other side uses is that you should be paid what you put into your sport. So, you know, your revenue should be linked to the revenue that you bring to the game. Okay, if you take that argument, think about the US women's soccer team. They win, they're popular, they bring more money to the game. They are paid significantly less than the men in the United States. Why? Because of sexism. There is no way you can hide from this fact. It is pure sexism that keeps them, underpaid. So, you can talk about popularity equals pay until you go blue in the face, but it's not actually true because these women are household names. They are the household names in the States, not the men. They are paid less. So, there's an example of where, it falls apart, that argument.
It's a bit like, sorry, I keep interrupting here, but
You're right.
I see it as almost like a vicious cycle. You've got the leaders of the sport, and then you've got television. Television is so powerful, or the media, and then you've got the sponsors. And which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So the men get the opportunity to play on prime time. They draw the big fans. They draw the audience, the big figures, TV ratings are just everything. So therefore they get the endorsements, they become the household names. That's just been the way it is. But who makes the first move? Who puts women on prime time? Suddenly when you do and the ratings come, then the sponsors come. Sponsors bring the money. Absolutely. And the money pays the women, the athletes.
And the cricketers found that.
Yeah.
And also the AFL, when they made the mistake of putting the first AFL women's match at a ground that didn't accommodate all the spectators.
So it's almost, who will make the first move, who will back the women in.
Men's sport has been given, the opportunity to grow and to shine and to get the rusted on supporters. Women's sport is the first thing to go when, we don't have the budget for it, get rid of women's sport. It hasn't been given the same opportunity to grow like men's sport. And, the whole chicken and egg argument, and I argue this in the book, is it the media's fault? If there was more women's sport on TV, there would be more public support for it, or is it the other way around? That argument just stops people from finding solutions. It's like we're always talking about the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
How about we actually just show some commitment and some will to change things, to make society
a little bit
better.
of action.
A bit of action, a bit of courage, like the council, a bit of courage to do something. And you watch like the Women's Big Bash and the Women's AFL, there is interest out there.
What about women's netball? I mean, they just proved it this year. The Sun Corp, they put it on prime time, Channel 9. Suddenly people are watching.
And what was the flow-on effect? Is that they all got paid better?
They all got paid better.
Yeah, but Channel 9 didn't put it on the main channel.
No.
It was on
That's
Gem.
true. But
When-
it wasn't a good time. Well,
Yeah. And you go to the main channel and what's on? Crocodile Dundee 3. Like that. Really, they should have had that netball on the main channel.
Yeah, true.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. So, I mean, that's sort of at an elite level, but at a grassroots level, I know in Bayside, for example, and this was only 2 or 3 years ago, we had 27 pavilions, footy pavilions, cricket pavilions. We had 7 netball courts. We had more golf courses than netball courts, more croquet lawns than netball courts. We had over 200 girls not playing netball every Saturday because of capacity issues. And of those 27 pavilions, at that particular time, 97% of those pavilions did not have adequate female change facilities. The question is why?
How long ago was it?
This was back in 2015.
Oh my goodness.
And why? Why is quite simple. 80% of sporting infrastructure in an established municipality, metro, was built pre-1960. So how many females played sport pre-1960? And that answers your question. And if we can't get it happening at a grassroots level, how on earth are we going to have it happening at the elite level? So it's almost, it's cultural, it's behavioural.
Yeah.
And we need to attack it at all levels. But particularly, at grassroots level, if we don't attack it there and have a level playing field, I'm sure we'll discuss this later about the consequences.
Yeah, that's right. I will be taking questions from you lot a bit later on, but I just want to get through a number of these questions and then we'll open it to the floor. Just for Angela and Kelly, when you started commentating on in an area, you did men's sport before you did women's sport, and then you moved into women's as well. So you do both. When you were commentating on men's sport, how were you treated by the media and by the public?
Oh, it was a walk in the park. Look, I called netball on television for 8 years and no one said anything about my voice. I've called tennis for the BBC, ABC and the host broadcaster last summer and no one's ever said anything about my voice. And I called 14 games of Aussie rules on Channel 10 over 2 years. And I think everyone in Australia said something about my voice.
It's a very nice voice.
Oh, thank you. So Yeah, look, I mean...
So what does that say?
Well, I mean, what it said, I knew what I was getting in for when I was asked, and again, it was a male boss that rang me at Channel 10 and asked me if I wanted to commentate an AFL game on national television. Just, I guess, the bit of the backstory to it was that I never set out to do this. I've always wanted to be a sports journalist. I studied journalism at university, but never ever imagined that I would be a commentator, let alone on AFL. And I've worked for the ABC for more than 10 years, and it was the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and all the commentators went to Beijing, and they were a big short, a couple of commentators here for Aussie rules. So my executive producer rang me up and said, could I fly to Sydney and just call a game, as she put it, on news radio. Anyone that is listening doesn't know anything about AFL, so you can start. And I was really reluctant, but I agreed to do it. So I did one. The call came in from Beijing saying, and actually the night that I did it, it was Sydney and Geelong at ANZ Stadium, it's still called ANZ, out at Olympic Park. And my co-commentator lost his voice at three-quarter time, and I had to call the entire last quarter by myself. So talk about a baptism of fire. The call came in from Beijing, you passed, can you back up and just do one more for us? Which I did the next week. It just happened to be on news radio in Sydney again, so I flew back up there. It was Lee Matthews' last game coaching the Brisbane Lions. And in typical Lee Matthews fashion, he made 11 changes at selection on the Thursday night. So there were players that I'd never seen before that were running around that night. Anyway, I did it. I thought I'll never ever do it ever again. And word of mouth, small industry, my boss from 10 found out and rang me and said, I want to put you on the TV. And that, I mean, in any other circumstance, any other male, I mean, most of the guys that I call with have been wanting to do this since they're 5. They've been practising as teenagers. No other circumstance where you've just done 2 that you're thrown in the deep end. So he rang, I said, don't be ridiculous. I said, no, I hung up. And I actually rang my dad after, and he was like, oh, you don't want to regret things. You should do it. You'll be fish and chip wrapper in 24 hours. They were his words. I thought, okay, I'm gonna cop it big time, but I'll do it just once. So I did it. I got positive feedback. I think they were surprised. They were expecting that it wouldn't be as positive, and so then I did the 14 or whatever it was over 2 years. But I mean, it's different, wasn't it? That's where I cop the criticism where I don't with netball and tennis as much. And
so was it more from the viewers or your co-workers?
No, most of my co-workers were okay. It was a difficult situation because I replaced a commentator that had a regular spot. So he was sort of pushed aside while I came in, and obviously I was parachuted in a sense. So it wasn't in the ideal situation, whereas at the ABC, I've had to work hard, do the low-profile games, just do one a weekend until you've eventually built up and you prove yourself.
You were above your station.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, but yeah, I mean, I heard myself back for the first time. I've never heard a woman called Aussie Rules, so it sounded different for me. But it takes time. You're trying to earn the trust of the audience. I look at it similar to like a TV newsreader. Why are they successful? Because it's been familiar. It's turning the TV on every night at 6 o'clock, and it's warmth and something that's familiar, and that's what makes them successful. So it was always going to take time for me. And criticism came. You have to develop a thick skin quickly. It was sink or swim, and I was able to just swim through those 2 years. It was completely overwhelming, but I was relieved when it finished. Because it sort of meant, took the pressure off, and I was able to just go away quietly at the ABC and continue to develop my craft without sort of the glare of national TV. But I don't regret it at all because it opened so many doors for me. And calling netball, calling tennis, doing all, I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't said yes that time to my list.
And Angela, you started in the ABC sort of in the news area before you moved into sport. So how did that change occur? And
so I always wanted to be a political journalist.
Yes.
I was honours in politics, and then I studied journalism, and I thought I'd combine the two and go to Canberra. And instead of going to Canberra, I came here. I was with the ABC in Adelaide, and because I understood sport, I grew up playing sport with my brother, so you could send me to any sport and I would know how to score in that sport. I know the terms. So the ABC sent me out to sporting stories. So the more sport I covered, the less politics I was doing, And then Melbourne took notice and said, come over here and we'd like you to present the sport on the news as well. So I came. And that was the end of the Canberra dream. So I didn't, a bit like Kelly, I didn't set out to be a sports journo. It just turned out that way. In terms of sort of backlash and that kind of thing, I guess colleagues have always been supportive of having, women in sport. It's more the decision makers who have held us back. It's not our peers. It's those people who come up with lines like, men don't want to hear women talk about sport, or women don't want to hear women talk about sport. Just these myths and assumptions that just keep us marginalised and stop us from flying. So over my career, I've had moments where I've encountered roadblocks, in sport. And in fact, at one point, I wanted to get out of sport because I just thought I just wasn't getting anywhere with it. But sport has followed me, and thankfully I've stayed involved because now I've found my voice and I'm working on projects that reflect my values, a couple of documentaries about AFLW, my book, and just things that, reflect who I am. Women are on the rise in sport. It's taken, my whole career of 20 years to get to this point where you can have a conversation about women in sport and there's lots of people who support you. Whereas when I started 20 years ago, it was very different. No one saw it as an equality issue. It was, if they're good enough, they should be playing with the men. It was that sort of mentality, rather than, we should create a competition where women can thrive, which is what we're now seeing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's taken a while. It's been as slow as continental drift, really. But thankfully now, the penny has dropped that this is not just the right thing to do. Well, it's been talked about until now as a business argument. It makes economic sense to include women, and I get the economic argument, and it's very strong. In the book, I say that the moral argument is actually stronger.
Yes,
the business case is good, I get it. But I think our starting point should always be that girls deserve the same opportunities and pathways in sport as boys.
Yeah.
And if you start from there, then have your conversations about the economics of it. But to start from there, it goes back to ancient Greece. You've got to change your thinking.
Yeah, that's right. Felicity, for you, when you were in local government, the main issues coming from the clubs, was it about change rooms? Was it about who has access to the playing fields?
It was more about the standard of the pavilions and the lack of female-friendly facilities. And I suppose it first came to my attention, and I was just trying to think, I think it was back in 2009, and I was team manager for my daughter's under-12 football team. And it was the first time we'd had girls play in the SMJFL, the South Metro Junior Football League, which is the second largest junior football league in the country, which incidentally I got so involved I ended up being a director of that as well. And my passion was about trying to drive this cultural change, but for me it was about really the absolute, there were just no female-friendly facilities in Bayside. As I said before, 98% of our facilities back in those days did not have female-friendly facilities, change rooms.
How do they find the new pavilions, of course, are unisex?
Yes, they are.
How do the young girls go with that? And how does unisex cover all of us?
Yes, well the new ones do. And part of this campaign we were actually successful in changing government policy. So prior to that, government was still providing funding and you didn't have to demonstrate female participation. Now you actually have to demonstrate, well, yes, if you want money for this pavilion, you've actually got to demonstrate that females are participants, are players and have access to that pavilion. So, for us it was we really did change the playing field in many ways.
And is that continuing since you?
Yes, well I note that the government have now set up Women in Sport office.
Yep.
change our game.
Oh, absolutely. And I doubt very much that you'll see any government money being given to anything that doesn't demonstrate female inclusiveness.
And it's translating, it's happening at AFL level. I was talking to the Tigers operation manager just the other week. They've won a licence for the AFLW for 2020, and Peggy O'Neill, their president, first ever female president of an AFL club, who's been somewhat of a game changer, not just there but right across the board. Went for a tour of the facilities, and they're looking to upgrade the female change rooms, and she said to them, "What do you want?" And they said, "We want hair dryers and we want some straighteners." And she said, "Done." So good to see she understands it. And I mean, obviously, that's a professional AFL club, but they're going through the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but when we talk about female-friendly facilities, I think it's important to understand it's not just for females, it's for males as well. And, I still can't believe you walk into so many pavilions and you've got those open showers.
Yes.
Okay.
No wonder the guys never shower after football matches.
What? But yeah, exactly. I mean, but it's really difficult too when you, if you've got a juniors match, a women's match, and then a blokes match all on the same day, and everyone's coming in and everyone's using the facilities. It's really, it's very tricky.
And it's not just players; it's umpires as well.
They have a separate room.
And good on Felicity for bringing about this change, because change requires acts of courage. And when you're often, as I've been in my career, the only woman in the room, sometimes it can be a little intimidating and hard to find your voice. So all power to you, for we're not going to get anywhere without acts of courage. And Gil McLaughlin, that was an act of courage to bring the competition forward 3 years. He didn't know if society was ready, and he had an inkling that it was ready, and he went for it, and against the wishes of some of his board members, and he went for it. And that's what we need. We need people to have the will to want to change things.
That's right. And I think at club level, it's been a bit slower. And that's mainly at the committee level, of trying to perhaps have a seat at the table at some of the clubs where they're just opening the door for women now. Yeah. Some clubs, I'm not sure if any are in the room, is it an all-male committee still around or not?
But Lily, I think people are starting to realise now if they want funding, if they want pavilion upgrades, they have to demonstrate.
So are they only doing it to get the money though? Is there a commitment?
Yeah, but I don't care how they do it as long as it's a cultural change and behavioural change.
But for the clubs, are they doing that just because it's the only way they can get ahead, or are they doing it because they want their club to survive and have women?
Well, I think
that's the question.
But I've reached a point in my career and my life where if there is a little bit of opportunism along the way to get to the end game, I'm okay with it now. Because games have been so slow and so hard fought, and you get all battle weary. If there's a sprinkling of opportunism in there, I don't care anymore. I just want us to get to the point where we have a fairer and more vibrant society. So if there is a little bit of the other, that's fine.
I'll take that on board.
And in the VAFA, which is the Victorian Amateur Football Association, we started our first ever women's comp this year. We've got nearly 2,000 girls in year one of the comp, 40 teams playing. Next year we'll have 60 teams playing. And speaking to each of the clubs, they say it's amazing the cultural change by just having female teams, having females in there after training. So, traditionally they'd all, train, go into the club rooms afterwards, drink, have beer and whatever. Completely different environment now that there are females. So going back to your question, I don't think it matters why. For me, what is important is what is happening as a result. And you can't unscramble this egg, it's gone too far.
And it translates at AFL level as well. I mean, I'm hearing exactly the same thing. A lot of these elite boys have been, as youngsters have been stars, private school scholarships, straight into the AFL system. and haven't really interacted or socialised with women that much.
As
And
equals.
yeah, exactly right. And I know at the Giants, the guys had finished their weights at 4. They had to be out of the weights room at 4 p.m. because all the women, of course, are working still. And so and they were also intimidated. They'd wait at the front of the weights room for the doors to open, for the guys to walk out, and they'd sort of be like intimidated, standing back, and then they would go in. And the club set the women down and said, no, go in as you want, just one by one, file in. And they've been able to mingle, and now they, obviously get on. And
so it's not us and them then.
No, exactly. And speaking to a lot of the leadership at various clubs, including the Giants, they've noticed a difference in the male players. Yeah.
That's
So it changes the culture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So some clubs have been more welcoming than others.
True.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Turn off that and we'll name names.
That's not going anywhere.
Yeah, right. We're journalists.
Oh, it's off the record. It's off the record. Will I have that on and be doing that? So that's all very good. What about the finance though? What about pay? Why is it so difficult to get that parity? And I know you said sponsorship and all that sort of business and television.
I think, okay, here's the thing about sport. Because of the commercialisation of sport, we're talking about massive amounts of money for certain men's sport. So the pay gap in this country, the sort of average pay gap is what, between 15 and 19%. In sport, it is larger because of the commercialisation of sport. I argue in the book that what we should be striving for is not pay parity overnight. That is foolish, that's not going to happen. But women should be fighting for a decent base salary so they don't have to work in another field, so they can become professional. So I think we need to just perhaps focus on that base salary first and then look at other, amounts after that. Because you're just not going to get, the average male footballer is on 304,000. We can't expect that to happen overnight, but I think we now need to channel our inner Billie Jean King and start demanding a decent base salary.
I don't think it's ever going to be even. I mean, we could, fast forward 20 years and prove me wrong. I'd love to sit here and say that it will be, but I mean, where are you going to get that money from? You're not going to take money off the men. Our highest paid cricketer at Cricket Australia on his contract, Steve Smith, on $2 million, and Elise Perry's on $300,000. So I agree with Ange. I mean, there's the ability to close the gap, and at the end of the day, particularly with the AFLW and W League as well, the cricket's probably leading the way. They're paying their players the most. Is that you want them to be able to do it full time and be professional without having to worry about making ends meet. Where am I going to pay the rent this week? And trying to do it part time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as sports journalists, are you on a parity with your male counterpart?
And that's on.
Is the Lisa Wilkinson question? Oh God, I've never known. I don't know what anyone else. When I was at the ABC, no one really talked about the money they were on. I do remember in my ABC days though that the drama of just trying to get a tiny increase going into the office, and it was very much a pay, like a structure of explaining why you think you're worth a bit more, just to jump over that next barrier and get into the next little pay scale. But look, for me, I'm just happy to be in a comfortable spot with sport. Finally, after falling out of love with it and wondering whether it really was right for me, it's nice to feel like I belong in it. And I think AFLW's had a lot to do with that.
I think roles reflect your pay, and the bigger issue that I see is the roles that men play in sports broadcasting here compared to the women. So we say we've come a long way, and we have. And look, AFLW was history making, but from my opinion, this year was groundbreaking when it came to women represented in the media, because suddenly, we were using women on the broadcast to commentate on women's games. And I mean, Ange mentioned it before, that it's the media executives, the TV executives that suddenly went, I mean, they previously used women in a broadcast because they looked nice, or, you know, they had one there to go with the 4 or 5 men. Suddenly the penny dropped and they went, actually, we could put a woman on this broadcast because she knows about football.
Yeah.
And so the flow-on effect to that was huge. I commentated 2 games a weekend, Saturday nights and Sundays this year for ABC Grandstand. And on a Saturday night, for the first time ever, our commentary box was split 50-50. I sit in the front row as a ball-by-ball commentator next to my co-commentator, Alistair Nicholson, and behind us is Nathan Burke, who's the special comments, and next to him is the AFLW women's captain, Lauren Arnell, in special comments. I sit in a commentary box where it's glass windows. To my right, in the up next door, was Daisy Pearce for Triple M.
Yeah.
On my left was Tiffany Cherry for 3AW. I mean, I've been the only one in these commentary boxes for 10 years. And suddenly, because of the opportunity to broadcast the women's game, these executives were like, oh wow, well let's use them. Let's use them in a major role. But I guess you talk about pay, we still see, particularly on the TV, you know, the hosts and the commentators are men, and then the sort of women have still the passive roles. You know, they're on the boundary or they're there for news updates. I am a huge student of sports broadcasting overseas. I love it. I mean, the face of BBC's Olympic coverage for the last 12 years has been Claire Balding.
Yeah.
The head of the ESPN tennis coverage, you know, right around the world. She's here at the Australian Open every year as Chris McHenry. You know, do we have a leading female face of any sport here on our TVs for any sport? We don't. And so I still feel like we've got a long way to go. Even though this year was just massive, we've still got a way to go. And so pay reflects the roles.
See, we're in Australia, we're very accepting of those overseas brilliant women, but we don't actually have it in our own country. But we love them.
Why is that?
Yes, why is that? Because they're somewhere else, you know. And we
Not threatening their space.
Yeah, exactly. Felicity, as a director of the Victorian Amateur Football Association, how do you find that table?
Very interesting, because it's the Amos, as we call ourselves, is a very traditional, you know, we're having our 125th year this year. We're the largest senior football organisation in the country. I think I was lucky that I came off the SMJFL board before moving on to the BAFA board. But it is very traditional, very parochial, and I find it absolutely fascinating that in 12 months we've become the largest female football league in the country, given our background.
And is that because of the board makeup, do you think? Or are they listening more? Or?
Yeah, but you know, if you look at our teams, they're very conservative. You know, there's Old Scotch, Old Xavier, Old St Kevin's. It's very much the old boys network.
Yeah.
So
a lot of ties.
A lot of old school ties, absolutely.
Australian football is in our blood. It's our national sport. It's our Indigenous game. And poets and writers and playwrights have written about it for, you know, a long time, about men flying for great marks and kicking miraculous goals. It's part of our cultural makeup. So, you know, women have always loved this game.
Yeah.
There just hasn't been a spot for them. You know, they've played sporadically for 100 years, but never been invited to the, you know, the big stage. So should we be surprised there's so much interest from girls in playing this sport? Well, no. We you know, and if we all kicked it. We all kicked the football growing up, some better than others, but we all kicked it in the street.
We all had a team.
We all had a team.
And I suppose if you look at junior participation rates, which is under 18, you know, it's been proven for the last, 8 or 9 years, the appetite and the capacity is there for that. So I suppose it was really a natural progression. But I wonder if the VAFA had have gone down that route if the AFL hadn't. You know, the junior leagues were very brave to actually make those decisions to go down that route. And I remember back in the early days, recruitment was a challenge, but an even bigger challenge for us was retention of players. Yeah. We're not going to have that issue anymore. That's where I see the landscape has changed. So, you know, next year, retention will not be an issue. managing growth will be our issue.
Is that because when they were about
Fantastic.
13 or 14 they were told they couldn't play with the
No,
boys?
no, I think it's because it was at that age group, it was either a secondary or a tertiary sport.
Right.
So we're actually now engaging, sort of that 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old. We're engaging with females who are actively participating, playing football, who otherwise probably, as a generalisation, would not be playing sport.
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many opportunities. Once you leave school, the doors are shutting. And if you look at the stats of sport, they call it sports literacy in schools, it's actually declining. So those born in those that were sort of 15, 16 in the 1980s, over a 1.6 kilometre race, I read the other day, at 250 metres faster than those that are 15, 16 today. Our level of fitness is declining because of this sport literacy. So the amount of sport being taught in school is declining. So you've got girls leaving.
Do we know?
It's a It's a very crowded curriculum. I can see heads nodding.
I'm just trying to work out how old I was at that age. I can't figure it out.
I'm just so excited that I reckon on paper I'm 250 faster than my daughter.
Let's quickly have a race.
And my daughter rose for Australia, so it's like, yes. So on paper I'm faster.
Sorry to interrupt. What was that stat?
It's a BCG report that's only just come out. So over a 1.6 kilometre distance, a 15, 16-year-old from the 1980s is 250 metres faster than a 15, 16-year-old today.
Wow. And that's because of a two full curriculum, so no one's getting...
And also technology.
Technology as well.
But it's also schools make a choice sometimes not to have a PE specific teachers as they go. There's only so much money.
And a lot of schools are losing their open space. We had that big BER building education revolution. We lost a lot of ovals, a lot of tennis courts. So it's difficult for schools to some schools.
And also how when suburbs grow and grow and grow. I remember my primary school, which had huge open spaces, now it's just got all buildings.
Yes.
Completely now.
Yeah.
And that's because of the population growth within those suburbs.
Absolutely, yeah. And
I have to say I'm very startled with that statistic.
yeah, so was I. That's why I remembered it.
I might have to write it down to remember it, but they're very good. Is there a burning question from the floor? Yes, Coral.
Oh, thank you. My question is, because a lot of us are from local government, we obviously are all noticing that we've got a huge number of girls' teams which we need to accommodate on our sporting ovals. And as well, we obviously have the issue with our pavilions, which we are going through the process of turning into gender neutral. But the ovals is really the most pressing issue.
Yes.
Now, are we going to have from the AFL and from the soccer clubs the realisation that something's got to give? And if we have all these female teams, which is great, then maybe some of the male teams are going to have to do what the female teams have done for netball, but they've got buys over the course of the time, so that there were weeks when they don't have to play. Because we can't suddenly generate more sporting grounds. We have to cope with what we've got. So are we going to see males doing this sport?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is that the days and the nights that sport is played has to be reviewed. We can't have, so next year in the VAFA, we will have 2,500, 3,000 girls that were not playing footy, 2 years ago. So we can't continue to expect everyone, boys and girls, males and females, to continue playing on a Saturday.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen that way. So there is going to have to be a review, and there's going to have to be a review on where sport is played. So we can't continue just to rely on council for ovals. In the VAFA, we're lucky because we can rely a lot on the old school, old boy network and use a lot of the ovals. But I know in the SNJFL, and I'm just speaking about from my personal experience, it's a critical issue, ovals.
And I suppose, Coral, too, it depends then on the size of the club that you're talking about. So one club may have, 14 teams. And one, why is everyone laughing? And one club may not, but the bigger the club, the bigger the ownership of the playing fields.
But when you start talking about using school ovals, you start having issues with maintenance because you mentioned Nathan Burke before, my assistant soccer coach. Just thought I'd throw that in. So we're a team of, we all started playing soccer this year, average age 50, elite soccer players, even though we've only just... Yes, Fiona. Even though we've all just taken it up this year, so we've got the mum tildas and the mighty tildas. We play at Sandringham Secondary, but nobody takes ownership on the maintenance. You should see the conditions we play in. There's potholes, the school won't take ownership and the council won't take ownership. So we actually have to put the processes in place if we are going to remove the onus.
That would be a safety issue, surely.
Absolutely, but nobody takes responsibility.
So Liz, can I ask a question about both cost recovery and expenditure as a proportion of overall council dollars? If we start with the rate dollar, what proportion of it is actually spent in distributing those dollars towards young women and their access to facilities and sporting activity? The reality is, from my understanding, is if you're a male between the age of 10 and 25, you're disproportionately a beneficiary of the rate dollar.
And that's been a lot of legacy as well.
Correct. Secondly, if you've got a cost recovery process against the user of the ground, a sports club against the user of the ground, then the nature of the cost recovery in male sports is less than that against female sports. And particularly if you look at the distribution of the nature of sports that females have tended to play, many of them are indoor in recreational facilities where they pay full cost recovery, as opposed to a football ground where it's a minor proportion of cost recovery. And sometimes then the engineer then says, oh, we'll only recover the cost inside the white line.
So as a general rule of thumb, any sport prior 1960, council pays. Any sport after 1960, basketball, for example, netball, it's more of a user pay model.
That's right.
So my daughter is a rower. My daughter pays nearly $3,000 a year to row. She's at a girls' school. My son is at a boys' school. Do you know how much he pays to row?
Zero.
Zero. Thank you.
But my point was to go to your question. My point was to go to your question about who takes responsibility for the distribution of teams across all of the assets of our community, schools as well. But if you've got a disproportionate cost recovery or distribution model, then you can't take responsibility because there isn't any dollars. But if you have an equitable process in terms of the cost recovery and distribution, then councils can step up to schools and say, look, we're willing to actually put a team on your ground and we'll cover the recovery cost and the replanting and whatever.
So for example, Bayside Council mow the lawns at Sandringham Secondary. But nobody is responsible for the ongoing maintenance to the level that we require.
Well, it isn't the state responsible, but they just don't do it.
I'm throwing these questions out, I don't know the answer.
I'll put that back on the state and
Kelly?
Felicity, I recall seeing the grass ceiling campaign on the front page of the Leader newspaper. It was fantastic. It made us all smile. I'm conscious that with the local government budgeting now and the investment needing to go into female-friendly facilities, is actually at the expense of female-dominated sport. So now that the female, allocation of grants for sport is to upgrade this facility as opposed to investing in netball courts and traditional female sports, as opposed to an actual equity lens.
Yeah, I just think we're so far behind that personally I don't think it matters if we're investing in pavilions or netball courts. I'm agreeing with you. I just think we've got so much to catch up on. And that grass ceiling campaign created the appetite, and as a result of that, council found the capacity in order to invest in that. We were talking about a council that had, remember I said 27 pavilions, 98% of them did not have adequate female change facilities. We had neglected females over a long period of time.
As just an extension of that, I'm hearing from a number of sports, they're a little miffed with all the attention that AFLW gets and the rise of women in cricket. So the rise of women in male sports is upsetting some of the others.
But it's detrimental to their investment.
Yeah, well,
the investment's not increasing equivalently.
But I guess I still would argue that having a more competitive landscape for women is a good thing, because it does force all of these sports to do more than just give lip service.
Female mountain bikers happen to go behind trees.
Yes.
Because
There's no toilet.
Because there's no toilets and facilities available to them, because they're female-friendly facilities which state and federal throwing all this money into, which is great. But it's getting taken up by the mainstream sports.
Yeah.
And we've still got, you go out to a mountain biking facility and you look around for a toilet and it's one of the fastest growing sports in the world. So, talk about.
We've just got so much to catch up on that, and that is the issue.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of the focus is on the normally male-dominated sport.
Well, that's where it's a big story, because AFLW is more than a sport; it's a movement. It's a movement because women haven't played nationally at an elite level, so it is a bit political.
Yes.
And it can't help but be that, because it's new, and it means more than sport. It's about culture. It's a big picture.
Other sports have suffered sponsorship-wise, money-wise. Suddenly the big-name sponsors want a piece of that, and it's at the expense of other women's sport. I mean, it's great all round, broader view, fantastic for women's sport, but the issue is behind the scenes. They're scrambling really for money.
With the mountain biking, how do you see that changing?
Leadership.
So it's leadership.
It's a leadership thing. Yeah. In all sports, it's not just mountain biking. It's probably just the standout one where you just don't go to a mountain bike park or there's exceptions, of course. But
it's also having that brave conversation. You talking about it tonight. I remember the first we had a sports breakfast, and we had every single sporting organisation at a breakfast. We were at Royal Melbourne Golf Course, and I was speaking, and the officer said to me, "You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't talk about 98% of the pavilions and this, that, and the other, and the 27 netball, 7 netball courts and the 27 pavilion. You can't talk about that." And I said, "You know what? I can talk about it, because if I don't talk about it, this is when I was mayor, no one else will." And that was the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah.
And we spoke about it, and we spoke about it in a way that it was constructive. And we said, if you want to be part of this conversation, get on board, but be constructive about it. Don't bag the crap out of the council. Talk about how we can actually improve things. We want solutions. And we then had a meeting with the Leader newspaper, and we got some key influential people from these sporting organisations around a table. We're at a cafe in Elwood. There was about 10 of us around the table, and we all had stories, and that formed the campaign. So it was very much a community campaign, but it started with having the conversation. So my advice is talk about it, put it on the radar, and bring people along with you, because you can't do anything as an individual. We're talking about it's very much a problem that we can only all of us together can provide a solution for. But you've got to talk about it.
Tom,
Thank you. Something that girls touched on earlier was senior administration in sport. And I believe that's where there's an enormous problem. I'm actually on an AFL board. I've been on it for 10 years. When I first joined it, it was just a football board, all males. Been able to change it. It's now basically, well, I can't think, it's basically a 50-50 board, but we're not a football board. We're a football netball board. And one of us talking about the difference it makes to have females in your club. That's right too. I'll tell you what, you're only halfway there. You've got to get families within the club and the whole show will change. The whole business will change. And you just become so strong a lobbying outfit with the family there rather than a bunch of males. I've been a football trainer in Melbourne, it's a suburban place. That's the sort of thing we had 30 years ago. I can't, no, I mean that.
Yeah, I know you do.
Just rubbish. I thought those days were being and gone. I live in a town of 90 people. In the last 21 years, we've been in 11 grand finals. So we are doing something wrong, right. No, we are doing something right. And I'm not talking here on winning premierships in the football, but we've won more A-grade netball premierships. And I just say to you, you've got to get involved, the males, you've got to bring them back. My football club, which I'm a life member of, now has a female president, a female secretary, and last week we were just granted an AFLW license. So, you know, but what I'm saying is, and I think Kelly, you might have touched on earlier, the administration at higher levels. I think you said our AFL leader, when he made the decision to go with AFLW 2 or 3 years, his head was on the chopping block. To me, that's just rubbish. He's the bloke that we should admire for doing something like that. And the other thing that's been brought up too, SRB, look, you want to do your grant, you want to do your facilities up. It's no problem to get $100. I'm correct there, former mayor. You'd agree with that? It's no sport and rec Victoria. It's no problem to get $100,000 off. Sorry, no problem. But I believe that grant should be a situation where you get 200,000 because
I think it should be a lot more than 2.
No, you're probably right there. But I believe it should be updated and worked in accordingly with the amount of male-female improvements you're doing. Just making $100,000 because you're changing your change rooms. Well, that's rubbish.
Yeah, I agree. So it was $10 million over 3 years, which I think I worked out to be $70,000 a council. And I thought $70,000 is not going to change. You'd be lucky to get one taller than it.
We're doing our change rooms up at the moment, but that will include male, female change rooms, male, female umpire change rooms, and a baby crash overlooking the netball court. And I just think that's, you know, that's the sort of way we've got to go. We've just got to change it. Change the game.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Wyndham City Council. We're sport, rec and social equity. I think for us, so there's a group of 8 councils in the region that have got together. And we've actually got a grant from SRB to do a regional planning, an actual plan for women and girls in sport from Melbourne City to Wyndham out to Melbourne. And for the driver for Wyndham, because we've been building gender equitable facilities since 2009, everything reads as gender neutral. But when the facilities are populated, they're populated with the same cultures, the same norms, and the same people who have access to leisure time. So I suppose my question to the panel is, how, until we fundamentally change some of the social constructs around access to leisure and women's roles in the family, being from a municipality as 54% of the population is dependence. So it's how do we actually shift that and allow women and girls to have opportunities?
It's this big picture stuff, the barriers for women in sport, cultural, social, economic. I look at it in the book, the issues around body image. These are the big questions that we need to be tackling as a society to make it easier for women to stay in sport and not drop out when they become teenagers, because it's not cool. I don't want to be seen in that gear. I'm not happy with my body. So I'm all about the big picture stuff. I think it's about calling out sexism, it's about calling out bad behaviour, it's about valuing girls and women, it's about not comparing women's sport and men's sport. These are the things that create change and make it easier for girls and women to stay involved. So if you hear that women's sport is shit, you're just, at some point you might start to believe it. And that's kind of the keyboard warrior response to the rise of women in sport, is to say, that well thought out sentence, women's sport is shit. And what we need to do is just call out that behaviour and celebrate the differences between men and women rather than denigrate women. So we are going to hear a lot of, and we've heard this with AFLW, that they're not as strong, not as fast as the men. I would argue that surely what makes a sporting contest entertaining is the actual contest, rather than the sex of those competing. I've fallen asleep watching men's sport. It can happen. They are not the measuring stick of greatness, But I just think that we need to celebrate women, and we don't do it in any other sector either, to be honest. No. Sport's not the only one here. We're different. We're gloriously different. Men are most of the time going to be faster and stronger, but who cares? Kelly?
I like to be positive here. I look how quickly it's changed. When I was...
in this little bit we just had. It wasn't quick before that.
No. Yeah, you're right. Well, you're right. Let's go. When I was young girl, growing up in Adelaide, you either played netball or a bit of basketball if you're a little bit different. Like, I've got a younger sister, so I was one of two daughters, and my dad absolutely loved Aussie rules, and I went to just all these games, the AFLW, working, commentating, and I would leave and so I'd see all these fathers leave with their daughter. And I felt sad for my dad, because I'm like, he missed out. I never saw a girl play football. I didn't know it was possible. So suddenly this generation is coming through. 5 years ago, there were a couple of things that I remember happening. The Daily Telegraph in Sydney named it Sportswoman of the Year Black Caviar. And Rebel, the sporting manufacturer, named its face of women's sport was Kylie Clark. So Michael Clark, the then Australian cricket captain, his wife. This week, Rebel had a media conference in Sydney next to the FFA CEO David Gallup, where they announced they were coming on board as the major sponsor of the W League, which kicks off next weekend. So that's how much it's changed in 5 years. I just think it can change so quickly, and it's filtering down by generations.
Can I just add to that? It's so important because sport is the most inclusive, the most reaching, the most egalitarian activity I think there is in any community. So it's so important at a grassroots level to include males and females, and particularly in your region, of cultural diversity, because it is the leveller. So I suppose
for men.
No, but we need to make it the level of females.
Yes. It sort of has been. Sport's been dining out on this whole idea that it is the great leveller, and it is about fairness. It's fair game, fair this, fair that, fair everything. But it's only been fair really for half the population.
Yes.
Until now, when it's starting to change. But it really, sport to me has sadly. It's been a decade behind the rest of society. It has lagged behind, but it is now starting to change.
Yes. So my question to you is, what can you do to provide a platform for positive role models?
Yeah, I think there's so much and so many questions and all that we're just trying to refine. It's just, I suppose, well, Corinne and I are in recreation strategy and policy, so we've just done a strategy for the next 27 years of infrastructure delivery, which is around $1 billion, with 622 million of that as council commitment. So who gets access to that money and opportunity and all of that sort of stuff kicks in, and how you perpetuate access and opportunity. So I think for us, we've got all these wonderful high-level inclusive and policy statements and principles, but it's really the body of Corinne's work she's just about to do, which is around really those targets and around there's no compromise. You are reaching targets of gender equity, you're reaching targets of access, because I think without those we're really not.
And you have to action it.
We're not able to change. We're not changing it because the men who puts kids to bed or who does the dishes or who goes and plays sport, and that's the reality of what's playing out in the community and how people are being able to access that, especially at a parent level and all that. So they're the things that we really are.
And don't forget, it's all ages.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just under 18s.
Sharon?
A couple of things. I run a girls' cricket competition, whilst I also am in a local club. And like Joe, I'm the token female on an association board as well. So for local government, my questions are, at the start of Cricket Victoria are putting a lot of money, Cricket Australia and Victoria are putting a lot of money into girls' sport. And what we find, some of the barriers are local government in some ways. It's really hard. I get charged a lot of money to hire a cricket ground for a Wednesday night, where there is actually no sport being played anyway. If I was a club, if I wasn't the association and running it, I would get a better deal. So I'm just wondering how we can change things.
Have you come across that?
No, I haven't come across that before. I have come across having denied access, but not a different fee. Yeah, so I would question that. I'd go back to the council policy, and because there would be nothing in that council policy that says females should be charged more than males. You know, ask them what policy they're making their decision on.
Have you asked that question?
I haven't actually.
I'd love to see their fees and charges.
Oh, I know that the clubs get charged less. And so this year we've gone home and away because it was costing, we have no money. It was costing us too much. And the second thing is, now that we've gone home and away, so clubs themselves, when they have boys' teams and women's teams and girls' teams, who gets access to the top ground?
Yeah.
I can tell you at my club it's not the women.
I can tell you in none of the girls' teams, they all put in a ground and they all had to change it because when it came down to it, yes, we love girls' cricket, we love the fact that it's being played, but yeah, the boys train on that night, so bad luck you get this over.
Yeah, we're the same about soccer.
Training. Not even against playing games, it's against training.
I've heard this a lot. And I was at an event at the Fitzroy Football Club recently, and one of the boy girls was on the panel with me. And the question from the floor was, what would you like to see happen next? We're seeing the rise of women in Australian rules football. And we were at the Brunswick Street Oval, and she said, I want to play there. And she said that in front of the board. I thought that was really courageous.
Yeah.
She just wants to play on that revered ground. And wouldn't it be a statement of equality if they could mix that up a little bit and give her team an opportunity to play on such hallowed turf?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just applauded. She said it. I thought it was great.
Yes, Councillor.
Just a couple of really good grassroots victories that I can mention about different councils. I come from Cardinia Shire Council. We're an interface council, about 5 to 6 families a day moving in for the last 10 years. going back about 7 or 8 years ago, I've been a councillor 9 years now, our CEO went to see a netball game, and Beaconsfield had won most of the grand finals in the area. And when he said, where do the girls get changed? They had this old shed and most got changed in the car. And he said, this is a disgrace. So he came back to council, and it was an all-male council at the time. And he said, we need to change our policy on this. Women need to have facilities, just like the guys. This is a disgrace. So we now build, with all our new pavilions, we've got 2 standalone pavilions for women in netball. We build lights with our grounds, we build new netball courts. They have a social area, they have a kiosk, they have change rooms, a whole lot. They cost about $750,000 each of them. Some of them you can build with the men as well, but we changed our policy, and we don't look in local government. If you looked at who pays for what, you wouldn't have anything. You'd sell off all the parks and gardens. They cost you, pools cost you heaps, libraries cost you heaps. But we invest in that because it's the right thing to do, and that started off with an all-male council, and we've incorporated that in all our facilities that we've built. A second victory, I'm involved in the Waverley Gymnastics Club. 1,500 girls go there, 1,400 in the recreational stream, 100 in the competition stream. Last 3, and they're independently, they fund themselves, so they don't get money off government to fund it like the Western Australian gymnastics, where they were getting $750,000 a year, and as soon as they pulled it, the state government, the thing collapsed. Ours is totally self-funded. Last 3 Olympic Games, we've had 1 girl go to every Olympic Games, and in Rio, there was only 1 girl win, and she was from our club. The club had lobbied for 20 years to get their inside of their facility refurbished. In the end, it became the #1 sport and rec development in a report done that should be built. The club said, we'll put in $1 million, they'll borrow $500,000, and they saved up $500,000. The local council, Monash Council, put in one of their budgets $3 million. It was going to cost $5.875 million to rebuild the facility. They're going to put in $3 million. Then, at the next budget, they pulled the money. So then, I as a councillor went and spoke to some councillors who were there, and with a concerted approach from the local paper and the gymnastics club, there were 200 girls turned up at council meetings with their things and the whole lot of it. Within 3 weeks, that council put up a new motion, put up $3 million towards the facility. Then there was a federal election coming up, so Julie Bishop finished up turning up because it was a marginal seat. Both sides agreed to $2.35 million they would put into it, so it didn't matter who won on that. Then we went to the state government and we said, right, your #1 sport and rec grant, and 98% of it's women's sport, women's gymnastics. We said, we need off you have a $750,000 sporting grant. And I took the club to meet John Aaron, and I took them to meet the assistant treasurer about it too. They knew about it. Do you know it got knocked back? It got knocked back to $750,000. So do you know what Monash Council did through Jeff Wade? He put up a motion to put another $750,000 to it to make sure it would still go ahead. Then they brought in this new thing about recreational pavilions getting refurbed. The club turned, the Sport and Rec Victoria worked out that, gee, they got $5.875 million already in the budget. Let's move it to Oakley, and the council will put in another $6 million to do it, but there's a grant there, maximum $3 million from the state government. We finished up getting, it hasn't been built yet, but it's all been factored in. The federal government are putting in 2.35, the council about $8 million, the club $1 million, and they finished up getting $3 million off the state government. So through local government, some people believe, if you do it the right way and you lobby and you get reports done and it stands out really, really majorly.
Well, I think the lesson there is, it's an election year next year.
Yep.
Be mindful.
So there are some victories.
Thanks for that.
Hi, my name is Samantha Byrne. I'm one of the councillors for the Valley. I loved your story. I thought it was great, but we're in safe labour seats and we're shit out of luck when it comes to any sort of safe seats. We're not inner city, so we don't get inner city grants. We're not a growth corridor, so we don't get any growth corridor grants. So I suppose my question to the panel is, with all of your experience, is there any places around the world that have really combated this change, I suppose, to be able to get the women into their sporting pavilions in a cost-effective or efficient way that we could potentially model ourselves on?
Norway. We're all going to Norway, that's right.
Yeah, a lot of the Scandinavian countries, but I'll leave it open, but Norway for sure.
I just think there's just been some systemic underinvestment in female sporting infrastructure. Personally, I don't think there's any cost-effective, efficient way of catching up. You've just got to bite the bullet and invest the money. And if your council doesn't have the appetite to do it, you have to create that appetite. You've got to bring the community along with you. My suggestion would be approach the leader. So the Bayside leader, when we ran this campaign, which is still running today, it won a Melbourne Press Quill Award. So it was a very prestigious award. And the leader newspaper group have said any other council that wants to run this campaign, they will run it. So just create the appetite with the community.
The appetite's there.
No, but you've got to put it on the radar.
With the heart of the EFL competition, which is a really strong football comp, we've got heaps of really strong clubs, but we still just, in a rate capping environment, how much can we seriously be putting our rate paying into debt in order to upgrade our probably very similar 27 pavilions, of which 98.
Yeah, and you know, it's very similar because Bayside's, you know, Liberal, Winnie Valley is Labor, but very similar.
Yeah. I'll go back to my earlier comment that if you look at the cost recovery against different sections of your community, you'll discover that women are seriously disadvantaged. Argue the case that there has to be equity in cost recovery and distribution of the rate dollar, and you'll get the money.
And
almost invariably
can I say, when we ran this campaign, I had no support from any councillor, none whatsoever. I used the Women's Charter to get this up and running. That was my fallback. Because the Women's Charter said we will remove any obstacle or vehicle in the way of, you know, female participation in decision making and
is that charter across all councils? Do you have that charter?
Individual councils have adopted it.
Right.
So I had to use that as my fallback. Create the appetite in the community, then the council got on board with it, and then the council found the money.
That's fantastic. Kelly?
I just think the case study of the Darebin Falcons is a really important story to be told, in that Darebin Council were really, really bold way back when Darebin Falcons approached them about getting access to a cricket ground in the off-season, and they went, oh, okay. And then the Darebin Falcons said, we want our own ground. And Darebin Council, against enormous backlash and hate mail and the rest, was really, really vile, said, yes, we're going to build you a pavilion. And the backlash, like you were saying, was very few people in leadership roles in support of this, but they absolutely were brave and went through with it and said, we will build it and they will come. And if you look at who was playing the AFLW last year, or this year, This year. I think it was 15 or 18 Darebin Falcon players in the league. Like, it was a really bold, brave decision by council to invest in something that was unheard of, and you can now see the fruits of that investment. And it's equity. It's actual equity. Like, we've never invested in female sport like this. We need to do it, and they did it, and that's like 15 years ago.
When it was unfashionable.
Yeah, absolutely. They got so much grief for it.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was really, really vile, but they did it, and look at where we are now.
Yeah. Can I make another suggestion?
Yes.
A sports audit. We've done a sports audit and actually put a monetary amount on how much it is that we pay for sports participation. So when you have the cricketers, cost us the most amount of money. You've got 22 people using a cricket oval, where we would have 8 netball courts on that and have 2,000 using that at the same time. So you're able to actually quantify how much it costs council for each person that plays cricket, plays hockey, plays soccer, plays footy, all the way through. And that really helps you for your arguments to do a sports audit.
So last year I was the MAB rep, and I put up a motion at State Council that that we call on that the MAB do an audit of all the sporting facilities across Victoria. Because, I'm just trying to think, you said that, well, no, we asked the minister to do it, but it never actually got traction. So I'm wondering, as a collective body in this room here, whether we could get an audit done of the number of female-friendly facilities out there in the community, because I think going back to the question that you asked before, we need state government and federal government to put money into this issue, because it just can't be local government alone to solve the issue.
I think it has to be state and federal. Just before you, Tom, there's a councillor. Yes.
Martin Duke from South Coast Shire Council. We're very lucky to have built lots of new ovals and soccer grounds in the last 2 years, and everything being very female friendly, and that was designed that way. The only problem is that they've actually outgrown themselves within 2 years of the number of people participating.
Don't you hate it when you have an active community?
Active community, so with another 4 netball courts built, we're in the process now of building another basketball pavilion, which is $13 million, which is put to that one, to build that, and that's going to work with that with the school, the education department, because it abuts the school, so as they can use, so we can use their pavilion. We're actually joining the two of them together to create 4 basketball courts. But we're interested in Basketball Victoria, or the basketball team down there, actually want to take control of it. They want to control everything. We're saying, no, you can't control the kiosk, it's not yours. We want to make these clubs grow, and we'll have the hours and set our own hours. No, it doesn't fall that way, but it was really like they came in and said, this is what we want and this is how we'll help you get the money. Hang on, it doesn't work that way. We've already got $13 million coming our way, so, and as you said, we're not in the safe seat. We're in a really great situation down on our seat, because it was only a 2% swing either way, so money's going to come our way. No profit at all. So we'll end up probably having this thing funded in the end without.
But isn't that great that that growth of sport participation has been?
Well, we're lucky we've got the developed contribution fund coming through. So all the development with all the going there, we have a fund coming through from them that pays for a lot of this development. So lucky for us to be in a really developing area where the contributions come in from the developers to help pay for future things. So it has really made our space an amazing space there. And we had a football match on the 2 weekends ago, and there's 10,000 people over the 2 AFL size ovals and the netball courts. So 10,000 people, which nobody could park, nobody could go anywhere.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations, congratulations. Yes.
I'd like to comment further. I've listened to Frank particularly talk about the parity there, the cost.
Yes.
And the return on investment back to council. I'd actually like to commend the apology tonight, Vicky Ward. I'm a councillor in the Shire in Nillumbik, and Vicky represents us in Eltham. And over the last 11 months, Vicky's been an absolute power breaker for Eltham. She's really driven the Research Park Pavilion, Eltham North Pavilion. We've just got a substantial government grant through Eltham High School, and we've got several other smaller pavilions as well that are about to come. So a lot of those are including the female-friendly participants, and a lot of them are actually getting 4 change rooms in those pavilions, 2 for the girls and 2 for the males as well. We're anticipating almost a double or a 100% increase over the next 4 years in female participation in seasonal ball sports as well. So Vicky's been a tremendous support in that area, and I just can't say thank you to her. And
absolutely, I'll feed it back.
Yeah.
So it gets back to Moonee Valley. You've got to find champions.
Get another Vicky.
In politics and outside of politics.
Women short and sick, so that's how they do it.
And when the Western Region mayors went to Canberra,
recently, outside of politics.
Oh, we know it.
Okay.
It's not a federal issue.
Right. And state, I suppose. I heard an interesting figure the other day. I think sport is such a great confidence booster, and it's one way we can really develop everybody's confidence, not just women. But I heard a statement the other day that girls at 10 years old are at their most confident they ever will be, and it's downhill from there. What do you think we can do? I'll throw a question in there then. What do you think we can do about that? I know you're saying retention in soccer's starting to increase, which hopefully will bring that age group up. Well, what else can we do?
There's this great The Like a Girl campaign. Clearly spells this out. That pre-pubescent girls are invincible. Show us how you throw, kick, fight like a girl, and they were just so strong and so confident. Teenage years, they start to believe the bullshit. The messages that are being sent from the media, society, telling them to be a woman, you need to fit this particular stereotype. So, I hate to be all big picture and all Scandinavian again, but we've got to bust the stereotypes.
Yep.
We've got to let...
Culture again?
Well, yeah, it's not just femininity, masculinity. There are different types of femininity and masculinity. And to be truly equal is to be who you are and not feel the pressure to conform to the one particular stereotype, masculine, feminine, that is fed to you.
I think
that will make those girls feel happier about who they are, and then they'll be comfortable to stay in sport. I mean, I know that's a big cultural change.
But it's true, and what happens though, and it's more so with girls, but it's for boys too. There's a certain time where naivety stops and you start to think. And it's when you lose that naivety, which gives you that, oh, I can do anything, to, oh, I might have to be a little bit considered. Oh, what does that mean? Oh my gosh, oh no, I can't. Oh, what do you do? Oh, what do you do? You start to think, and that's how your brain forms, and that's where your cultural way of life is really important to be supported.
And I think that's also where female role models are so crucial. And again, I mean, we say how much it's changed, but 5 years ago, I don't think anyone here could name a Matilda. 5 years ago, I don't think anyone here could probably name, an Australian female cricketer. But now we all know Elise Perry and Meg Lanning. And these young girls can put the poster on the wall, and we all know Sam Kerr. And, we all know Erin Phillips. I mean, no one knew a female footballer 12 months ago. So suddenly there is, the equivalent of your Steve Smith and your Tim Cale and your Luke Hodge or whoever it might be. So I think role models are really...
And going a step further, in AFLW, women who are comfortable with their sexuality, like completely comfortable, and that's something that men can learn from as well,
And there's been a huge connection with a lot of the women, hasn't there, through social media, and you just have a look at, I'm so not social media, but the hits and everything.
Fake Twitter.
But the comments from young girls that are idolising these players that 12 months ago none of us knew. It's got to be positive.
And I think the other thing is at a grassroots level, and I know I keep coming back to it, sport has to be for all abilities. People like myself, for example, I may call myself an elite soccer player. The reality is I'm the most uncoordinated person I think that's ever walked. But the fact is, it doesn't matter on your ability, and I think sport at our local level should be encompassing all abilities. And when you talk about oval allocation, it shouldn't matter whether it's the elite team or whether it's the team of 50-year-old soccer players.
Yeah, but it does though. Yes, Darren?
I just wanted to make a few comments and see if they turn into questions. I'm part of a local soccer club. I'm on the board. I'm the only woman on the board, and I'm one of two coaches at the club. The first thing that I did when I joined the board was I had a look at our constitution and noticed that it was just out of date. And I did a quick audit of all our sort of neighbouring clubs and noticed they all had the same template. And so what happened in 2012, our governing body just sent a template to every club and sort of said, here you go, here's the new constitution. If you don't want to change it, this will remain to be your constitution. So what I did was I actually introduced gender balance on the board, so a new rule to increase gender balance and to allow for proxy voting so people who cannot attend could actually vote in favour of rules. And that was a huge challenge, just to explain what difference that can make to a club, and also to get people to understand governance in general and legal responsibilities. So I think, sort of going back to our conversation about leadership, I think that there still is a fair way to go for the governing bodies to show some leadership.
Yes.
We have to get our constitution approved by those governing bodies, and we introduced gender balance, and all we got was well done. So no story, no positive. Look at this demonstration. Soccer club making a difference, making a change. There was no story attached to that. And the other thing I wanted to say was my club's been around for a long time. This year, my girls team won the